Hello, welcome to the second episode of the Productivity Tips series. I am Rob van den Ecker. Today I would like to tell you about the PileFile, a new way of storing paper documents in personal information management. I have been using this system for many years and it helped me a lot in my efforts to stay organized. But first, I would briefly like to give you some theoretical background of this filing system. People store documents in several ways. On one end of the spectrum you have the filers, and on the other end, the pilers. It was Tom Malone working at MIT in 1983 who came up with the filers and pilers classification. The filers usually have a clean desk and put a lot of effort in systematic filing in folders and binders with tabs. The pilers, on the other hand, can be recognized by a messier desktop with piles on their desk. This does not mean that pilers have no system. They usually put their documents in concentric circles with so-called warm and cold areas. The warm areas contain the documents they are working on right now, and these documents also function as a reminder for things that need to be done. The documents further away, in the cold area, have less urgency. You may think that filing is better than piling, but is this really the case? Steve Whittaker, working at AT&T Labs, studied archiving efficiency. The group he studied consisted of managers, secretaries and researchers. Depending on their work style, they were classified as either pilers or filers. Filing facilitates finding back structured information and certainly works if you need a system that can be accessed by more than one person. However, this method has a lot of disadvantages in a personal information management environment. Whittaker found that filers have to put a lot of effort in filing and in maintaining the system. Furthermore, filers are often reluctant to discard documents. He also found that filers tend to file just to clean the workspace, sometimes resulting in storage of non-relevant documents. He called this premature filing. And finally, filers sometimes tend to make too many categories, making it more difficult to find back the information. Moreover, if a filer no longer oversees all his categories, he sometimes duplicates an already existing category. Perhaps you are surprised, but piling appears to be a more efficient approach than generally expected. Pilers can often find back relevant information fast. Older information is usually less relevant, and because pilers have the recent information on top of their piles, they have no difficulty finding it. Pilers also have less overhead in managing data, because they simply put new documents on top of their pile, without first categorizing and filing. Pilers also have less difficulty than filers cleaning up archives. There are certainly also cons to the piling approach, as this method does not scale well, especially if the piles get too high and too many. In a highly structured environment, piling is not optimal. You may wonder if it is possible to take the best of both worlds. The system should be easy to maintain, storage should be chronological and at the same time have some categorization. It should also have a reminder function, and of course it should be easy to find back documents. The PileFile system I want to show you comes close to this ideal. Here you see an example of a PileFile. At first sight it may not look much different from a binder with tabs used by a filer. However, there are significant differences. First of all, this is a pile. Documents are stored in chronological order, the oldest at the bottom and the most recent ones on the top. The pile is kept together by a ring binder or a tube clip fastener. Here is the content sheet, containing categories. This sheet is a couple of centimeters shorter than the documents. I will show you in a moment why. And here are the index tabs. I use Post-it index tabs from 3M. Adding information to a PileFile is not much different to adding a document to a normal pile. The main difference is that you add an index tab corresponding to the relevant category. You can now see why the content sheet is narrower than the documents. It makes attaching the index tab easier. The advantage of a PileFile becomes clear when you start looking for information. You could start browsing through a couple of documents on top of the file, like a piler would do. In a lot of cases you will find what you are looking for on the top of the pile, as these are the most recent documents. You can also easily find back all the most recent documents per category. They are marked by the tabs you see when you look at your pile from the top. For instance, the latest steering committee minutes, the latest planning, and the latest quotes. But there is more. Contrary to a normal file system, a document in a PileFile can have more than one category, because it can have more than one index tab. In this case, the meeting minutes contain a planning schedule. In this PileFile you can find the document under the tab Project Team Minutes and under Planning. In a normal folder system you would have to make a copy of a document and store it in two different locations. To further facilitate finding back documents, you can also make short notes on the Index tab. To highlight documents, you can use different colored Index tabs. I use blue tabs to distinguish final documents from draft ones. This can be useful for instance, locating final versions of reports and contracts. There is still one thing missing, and that is the reminder functionality. Pilers feel uneasy to file a document, because the document will then be out of sight, and they are afraid they will forget to work on it. One way of setting a reminder is by making a separate action category. Add a tab to every document that contains unfinished business, and remove the tab when the actions in the document have been completed. Personally, I'm a fan of David Allen's Getting Things Done system. This system promotes distilling actions from documents and putting them on a next action list. This next action list is reviewed periodically. To make a link between the original document and the distilled next action list, I add a sequence number to the documents in the pile. I will tell more about sequence numbers in a later episode on uniform resource locators in personal information management. In this example you can see that this action item originates from a hard copy with sequence number 490 in the PileFile. I hope you have enjoyed this episode about the PileFile concept, combining the best from piling and filing strategies. This was Rob van den Akker, looking forward seeing you again with one of my next episodes.